This is the private sitting room for the Princess Royal Princess Anne. She has opened up the room and opened up her schedule to do something she rarely does, conduct an interview with us about things she doesn't often talk about.
Diana never knew, not fully, that the ring on her finger was an echo of a marriage that predated her by 140 years. She just knew she liked the shape of the stone. London, 1981. A young woman sits across from a jeweller's catalogue. Not a private commission. Not a one-of-a-kind design drawn up in secret for a future queen. A catalogue. The kind anyone could order from. She points to a ring. 12 carats. Ceylon sapphire. Deep, saturated blue, the color of a storm about to break, ringed by 14 diamonds set in white gold. She doesn't know it yet. But she has just made a choice the House of Windsor will spend the next 4 decades trying to control. Her name is Diana Spencer. And the ring she picked that day would outlive her marriage. It would outlive her title. It would outlive her. It would not, however, outlive the argument over who deserves to wear it. Because here is what nobody tells you about royal jewelry. It isn't decoration. It's inheritance law, written in gemstones instead of legal text. And once Diana was gone, that inheritance law had no clean answer. I want you to sit with that for a second. A ring can't speak. It can't defend itself. It can't explain what it meant to the woman who chose it. All it can do is sit on a hand, in public, under cameras, and let the world decide what its presence means. For 40 years, that's exactly what's happened. So before we go further, and there is much further to go, for jewels, 3 women, and 1 royal family caught in the middle of all of it, I want to ask you something simple.
Welcome back to Gem of the Week. I'm Praveen, your guide through the fascinating world of diamonds and gemstones. Today we have a truly iconic piece to showcase, a stunning blue sapphire and diamond ring, famously associated with Princess Diana. This sapphire isn't just large, its design makes a bold statement.
Hi, viewers. If you inherited one piece of jewelry from someone you loved and lost, would you wear it every single day or keep it hidden away? Just answer in one word. Wear it or hide it. I'll read your answers. Now, back to 1981. The engagement ring itself was already a small scandal before Diana ever wore it in public. Royal brides didn't do this. They didn't pick from a catalogue. Custom design was the tradition, quiet, exclusive, made specifically for the woman who would wear it and never seen anywhere else. Diana broke that. She chose a ring that was, technically, available to any member of the public with enough money and the right jeweler. The royal family was not pleased. Because here's the uncomfortable truth about that world. Uniqueness isn't vanity to them. It's function. A ring that only a princess can own tells the public something about her position that words can't. A ring anyone could theoretically buy tells the public the opposite. But there was a reason Charles chose it anyway. And the reason wasn't rebellion. It was memory. Years earlier, the future king had watched his own grandmother wear a brooch. A deep blue sapphire, ringed by diamonds, older than the monarchy's living memory of itself. It had belonged to Queen Victoria. Before that, to Prince Albert, who gave it to her the night before their wedding in 1840. Charles saw that brooch. He never forgot it. And when it came time to choose Diana's ring, he went back to the same jeweler that had made it and asked for something that echoed it. That's the thing about inherited symbols. The person wearing them rarely knows the full weight of what they're carrying. She wore it through the wedding. Through 2 children. Through a decade of a marriage that the public watched unravel in real time, frame by frame, headline by headline. She wore it, on occasion, even after the divorce was finalized in 1996. And then, in the late summer of 1997, she was gone. I'm not going to walk you through the details of that night. You already know them. Everyone does. What matters for this story isn't how she died. It's what happened to what she left behind. Because a woman like Diana didn't just leave grieving sons. She left an inventory. And an inventory, in royal terms, is never simple.
But first, it's a pleasure and a great honour to welcome to Wogan Her Royal Highness Princess Anne.
Here's where the story splits into two different versions, and for years, only one of them was the one the public believed. The widely reported version said the ring went to Prince Harry first. That he held it. That, years later, he passed it to his older brother, so William could use it to propose to a young woman named Kate Middleton. That was the story for over 2 decades. Then, in 2023, Harry wrote a memoir. He called it Spare. And in it, he corrected the record himself. The ring never went to him at all. William received it directly, in the aftermath of their mother's death. What Harry actually inherited was something else entirely. A gold Cartier watch that had belonged to their mother, later worn, on occasion, by his own wife. 2 brothers. 2 different heirlooms. One inheritance, quietly and permanently divided the moment their mother died, whether they were old enough at the time to fully understand what was happening or not. Pause on that for a second. William was 15 years old when his mother died. Harry was 12. Somewhere in the machinery of a grieving royal household, decisions were being made about which stone would belong to which son. 15 and 12. And already, without either of them choosing it, their inheritance was being sorted into separate boxes. That's not scandal. That's not conspiracy. That's just what happens when private grief collides with public institution. The family had to keep functioning.
Forgive me if this is a naive question, but how on earth do you prepare for that?
Good question. We've been very lucky. My mother was the Queen for a very long time. And although you kind of know that this might happen, you don't really think about it very much. Not least of all because the monarchy is about continuity.
The firm, as insiders call it, doesn't pause for mourning. It reorganizes around it. So the ring went to William. And for 13 years, it disappeared from public view entirely. No headlines. No photographs. No sightings. Just a young man, growing older, carrying something in a box that used to belong to his mother. Until 2010. That year, William proposed. Not with a new ring, not with something designed fresh for the occasion the way royal tradition might have expected. He gave Kate Middleton his mother's ring. Think about what that decision actually meant. He didn't choose it because it was beautiful, though it was. He chose it, by his own account, because it let him keep a piece of his mother present at the exact moment he was building a family of his own. It was, in its own way, the opposite of what the ring's very existence had once represented. Diana picked that ring from a catalogue as a young, uncertain 20-year-old, stepping into a marriage and an institution she barely understood. William gave the same ring to his own fiancée as a grown man, fully aware of exactly what it meant, fully aware of the weight he was placing on her hand. Kate wore it to their wedding in 2011. She's worn it, quietly, consistently, ever since. Not as a museum piece. Not locked away in a vault for safekeeping. On her hand. In grocery stores, in state visits, in hospital wards, in every photograph taken of her for over a decade. By some public estimates, her daily ring stacked today, Sapphire included, is worth more than $500,000. But that's not really what the ring is worth. Not to the family. Not to the public who still, to this day, stop and stare when the light catches that particular shade of blue. Here's what I think most people miss about this whole story. The ring is the one piece of Diana's jewelry that never became controversial. Nobody accused Kate of disrespecting Diana's memory by wearing it. Nobody wrote furious open letters demanding it be returned to the Crown collection instead. If anything, the opposite happened. The public loved it. They saw continuity in it. Grandmother's stone. Mother's engagement ring. Granddaughter-in-law's daily reminder of a woman she never got to meet. It became, almost by accident, the one clean story in a family full of complicated ones.
People talked about the fact that I might have been selected, but it was very much might have been selected. I mean, the horse and I didn't have to appear, at least anyway, that year, and we didn't manage really to do that, so we didn't get that close. It would have been much worse if one had gone very well, you know, and had been picked, and then the horse had gone lame. That would have been much worse.
But here's the part that should unsettle you a little. That clean story is the exception. Because the ring wasn't the only jewel Diana wore. It wasn't even the only sapphire connected to her name. There were other pieces. A brooch, older than the monarchy's memory of itself, that inspired her ring in the first place, and that now sits on a completely different woman's shoulder. A necklace, gifted to her personally on her wedding day, that vanished back into royal storage after her death, only to resurface years later in a shape Diana herself would never recognize. A brooch worn once, gloriously, in Australia in 1983, that then disappeared from public view entirely for over 2 decades, only to reappear on the one woman whose relationship with Diana was defined by betrayal. 3 more jewels. 3 more inheritance stories. And unlike the ring, none of them ended quietly. Somewhere in a private collection, catalogued and cross-referenced the way institutions catalogue everything they consider valuable, those pieces waited. Waited for state visits. Waited for anniversaries. Waited for the exact right, or exact wrong, occasion to be worn in public again. And when they did resurface, the reaction wasn't warmth. It was outrage. Royal watchers, jewelry historians, ordinary people scrolling through photographs online, all asking some version of the same question. Who gave her the right to wear that? Not the ring. The other pieces. The ones connected not to Diana's son, but to the woman Diana's marriage collapsed because of. Because here's the thing about inheritance in a family this old, this documented, this watched. It's never really about the object. It's about who gets to be remembered as the rightful successor to a story that never actually ended cleanly. Diana didn't get to write the ending. She died at 36, mid-story, with the argument over her legacy still completely unresolved. And in the vacuum she left behind, 3 different women, across 3 different decades, would end up wearing pieces of that unfinished story, whether the public thought they'd earned the right to or not. The ring settled quietly into Kate's hand and stayed there. The rest of the story did not settle quietly at all. In the next chapter, I'm going to take you back further than 1981. Back to 1840, to a brooch given the night before a royal wedding that would end up shaping every single piece of jewelry in this story, including the ring you just heard about. A brooch that Queen Elizabeth wore to meet an American president. A brooch that now sits, controversially, on the woman who once stood between Diana and her marriage. Because before there was a war over Diana's jewelry, there was a much older sapphire that started all of it. And the woman wearing it today isn't who you'd expect. Windsor Castle. The night before her wedding, a young queen receives a gift from the man she's about to marry. Not a ring. A brooch. A single sapphire, deep and saturated, surrounded by diamonds cut in the old style, heavy and unmistakable even in candlelight. Prince Albert gives it to Victoria the evening before their vows. And Victoria, who does very little in her life without leaving instructions for the future, writes something into her will decades later. She calls it an heirloom of the crown. Not a personal possession. Not something to be sold, split, or forgotten. A commitment. Passed forward. Forever. She has no idea, in 1840, what that single decision will set in motion 140 years later. I want you to hold that thought. Because everything that follows in this story, the ring, the necklace, the feathers, all of it traces back to this one brooch, sitting quietly in a velvet box, waiting. For over a century, it did exactly what Victoria intended. It moved from monarch to monarch. Worn, stored, worn again. In 1961, Queen Elizabeth II wore it to greet an American president and his wife, a young couple named John and Jackie Kennedy, at Buckingham Palace. She wore it again in 1982, at the christening of a newborn prince named William. Same brooch. different century of royal history, worn on the same collarbone. Here's where it gets interesting. Decades later, a young Prince of Wales named Charles is choosing an engagement ring for the woman he's about to marry. He remembers his mother's brooch, the shape of the stone, the particular blue that seems to hold light instead of just reflecting it. He goes to the jeweler. He asks for something that echoes it. That's the ring Diana chooses in 1981. Not a coincidence. Not an accident. An echo, deliberately built, of a brooch given the night before a wedding 141 years earlier. Diana never wore the brooch itself. It wasn't hers to wear. It belonged to the reigning queen, and during Diana's lifetime, that was her mother-in-law, Queen Elizabeth. So Diana carried the echo. The queen kept the original. Stay with me here, because this is where the story starts to turn. Elizabeth reigned for 70 years. During that time, the brooch was hers, and hers alone, to wear or withhold. When she died in 2022, it didn't stay frozen in a display case somewhere, roped off, untouched. Crown heirlooms don't work that way. They move forward, always, to whoever holds the position next. And the person who now holds that position is Camilla. June 2024. Royal Ascot. The king's wife sits in the royal box, watching the racing, and pinned to her outfit is the same sapphire Prince Albert gave Victoria in 1840. Cameras catch it instantly. Royal watchers online recognize the shape within minutes, the same brooch, the same stone, the same weight of history, now sitting on a woman whose entire public identity, for over 3 decades, has been defined by one thing. Her relationship with Diana's husband. Before Diana died. And after. Here's the question that starts circulating within hours of those photographs going public. Does history care who's wearing it, or only that someone is? Because legally, there's no controversy here at all. The brooch was never Diana's. It was never meant to be hers. It belongs to the crown, passed to whoever occupies the position of queen consort or reigning queen, exactly as Victoria specified in 1840. Camilla wearing it isn't a violation of anything. It's the system working precisely as designed, for 180 years running. And yet, something about it sits uneasily with people who remember 1981. People who remember a young bride choosing a ring that echoed this exact brooch, worn by a mother-in-law who represented tradition, duty, and an institution Diana never fully belonged to. The brooch inspired the ring that became one of the most beloved royal symbols in modern history. Now the brooch itself sits on the collarbone of the woman whose affair with Charles helped end Diana's marriage. 2 objects. 1 origin. 2 completely different emotional temperatures. The ring is beloved. The brooch, worn by Camilla, is merely tolerated. Legally sound, historically accurate, and still, somehow, faintly uncomfortable to a public that has spent over 40 years deciding who gets to inherit which parts of this family's story. Pause here for a second, because I want to ask you something. If a piece of history was never really about the person who first popularized it, does the person wearing it now deserve any of the discomfort people feel? Or is the discomfort simply inherited, the same way the jewelry is? There's no clean answer to that. And that's exactly why this story doesn't end with one brooch. Because the Prince Albert sapphire wasn't the only piece of jewelry Diana's mother-in-law controlled during her lifetime. There was another gift, given to Diana personally, on her wedding day, by a different woman entirely. A gift that should have told a much simpler story. It didn't. August 1981. A wedding morning. Before Diana Spencer becomes Princess of Wales, before the cameras, before the 82,000 people lining the streets of London, she receives a private gift from Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Diana's own grandmother-in-law, 2 generations removed from the throne, offering a blessing in the form of a necklace. This one is different from the sapphire brooch. This one is given directly to Diana. Personally. On her wedding day. Not lent by the institution. Given, in the truest sense, by one woman to another, on the morning that changes everything. Diana wears it. Publicly, proudly, on multiple occasions throughout her marriage. It becomes, in its own quiet way, one of the more personal pieces in her entire collection, precisely because of how she received it. Then, in 1997, she's gone. And here's where royal inheritance rules do something the public rarely thinks about until it happens to a family they're actually watching. Not everything Diana wore in life was legally hers to leave behind. Some pieces belonged to the royal collection all along, on loan to her as Princess of Wales, expected to return to institutional storage the moment she was no longer the one holding that title. The Queen Mother's necklace was one of those pieces. So it went back. Quietly. No headlines. No ceremony. Just an object, returned to storage, exactly the way the rules required. For 15 years, it disappears entirely from public view. Then, in 2012, something changes. Camilla, by then Duchess of Cornwall, quietly borrows the necklace from storage. But she doesn't wear it as Diana wore it. She has it altered. Redesigned. The necklace becomes a brooch, a different shape entirely, worn on a different part of the body, styled in a way that makes it, to the untrained eye, almost unrecognizable from what it once was. For over a decade, almost nobody notices. Then, in the summer of 2025, the story breaks publicly, and it breaks hard. Royal watchers who track jewelry history for a living start putting the pieces together. Photographs surface, side by side, Diana wearing the original necklace at a formal dinner decades earlier, Camilla wearing the redesigned brooch version at a recent royal event. Same stones. Same origin. 2. She thought Diana's jewelry was supposed to be off-limits to Camilla entirely. Another calls the redesign a form of disrespect to a woman who can no longer speak for herself. But here's what makes this one different from the Sapphire brooch story. The Prince Albert Sapphire was never Diana's. Camilla wearing it, however uncomfortable, was simply institutional succession playing out as designed. This necklace was Diana's. Given to her, personally, by a woman who loved her, on the single morning that defined the rest of her life. And it didn't just move to a new owner. It was changed. Physically altered, reshaped into something Diana herself would likely never recognize if she saw it today. A jewelry expert, brought in by one outlet to assess the situation, made an important distinction. The stones themselves, he said, hold most of the necklace's true value, and the redesign likely did little to diminish that. But he also admitted something else. The piece would have been worth more, historically and emotionally, had it simply been left the way it was. Left the way it was. 3 words that carry more weight than almost anything else in this entire story. Because that's really the question hanging over every single piece of jewelry in this chapter, isn't it? Not who owns it. Not who's legally entitled to wear it. But whether anyone has the right to change what someone else left behind, simply because the person who left it can no longer object. Buckingham Palace has never issued a detailed public explanation for the necklace's transformation. No statement walking through the decision, no acknowledgement of when exactly the redesign happened or why. Just silence, and a brooch, worn in public, that used to be something else entirely. Some defenders point out that the piece technically belonged to the royal collection all along, meaning Camilla had every legal right to use it however she chose. Others argue that legal ownership and moral ownership are 2 very different things, especially when the woman who first wore it died before she ever got a say in what happened next. I'm not going to tell you which side is right. Honestly, I don't think there is a clean right answer here. What I can tell you is this. Somewhere in a private collection, a necklace that once represented one grandmother's blessing to a nervous young bride now exists as something else entirely. Reshaped. Reproposed. Worn by the woman whose marriage to Diana's husband defined the tabloid decade that followed. And if you think that's the most controversial piece in this story, you haven't heard about the feathers yet. March 1983. Australia. Diana Spencer, now Princess of Wales for less than 2 years, steps out at an official engagement wearing something new. A brooch, worn as a pendant, depicting 3 ostrich feathers rendered in diamonds, with a ribbon of blue enamel spelling out a single motto beneath them. ICHDN. I serve. It's the emblem of the Prince of Wales himself, the formal symbol of the title Charles holds, the title that will one day belong to whoever marries the next heir in line. Diana wearing it is symbolic in the deepest possible sense. She isn't just his wife. She's the Princess of Wales, and this brooch, dating back to 1863, originally a gift to Princess Alexandra of Denmark from the people of Wales themselves, says exactly that, without a single word needing to be spoken. Diana wears it. The cameras capture it. And then, for reasons the public was never fully given, it disappears. Not just for a year or two. For over 2 decades. No sightings. No photographs. Nothing. Now, I want you to sit with that gap for a second, because I think it's the most important detail in this entire chapter. 23 years of silence. Diana's divorce happens during that silence. Diana's death happens during that silence. Charles' remarriage to Camilla happens during that silence. And then, in 2006, the silence breaks. The location is the premiere of a film called The History Boys, at London's Leicester Square. And there, pinned to Camilla Parker Bowles, by then formerly Duchess of Cornwall, is the same brooch Diana wore in Australia in 1983. This is Camilla's very first public outing wearing a piece of jewelry directly, unmistakably connected to Diana. It happens less than a year after Camilla's own wedding to Charles in 2005. Think about the timing. A brand new marriage. A brand new public role. And the very first heirloom she chooses to debut in that role once belonged to the woman whose marriage her own relationship helped unravel. The reaction, unsurprisingly, is not gentle. People close to the family, jewelry historians who track this collection professionally, have noted something specific about Camilla over the years. She's known for being extremely careful in her jewelry choices, deliberately avoiding pieces that might invite direct comparison to Diana. She understands, better than almost anyone, how sensitive that memory still is to the public. Which makes this particular choice, in 2006, either a rare miscalculation or a message. Nobody outside that room can say for certain which one it was. Camilla wears the brooch again in 2012, at the horse races at Cheltenham. And then, in a decision that reframes the entire trajectory of this piece, it eventually makes its way to Kate. November 2022. A state visit. South Africa's president arriving in London. Kate Middleton, now formerly the Princess of Wales herself following Charles' ascension to the throne months earlier, greets him wearing a plum-coloured coat dress. Pinned to it, for the first time in her life, is the Prince of Wales feathers brooch. The same brooch Diana wore in 1983. The same brooch Camilla debuted in 2006. Now resting on the woman who holds Diana's old title, married to Diana's own son. Here's what makes this moment different from every other jewelry controversy in this story. This time, there's almost no backlash at all. Because unlike Camilla wearing it, Kate wearing it makes a kind of sense the public doesn't have to work to accept. She's the Princess of Wales. It's the Princess of Wales brooch. The line from Diana to Kate feels direct, earned, almost inevitable. 3 women. 1 brooch. 40 years apart. And only one of those 3 transfers ever felt, to the watching public, like it belonged. I want you to think about what that says. Not about the jewelry. About us. About how we decide, almost instinctively, who's allowed to inherit a story and who's simply borrowing it. Kate inheriting Diana's symbols reads as continuity. A family healing forward, generation to generation, exactly the way royal succession is supposed to work. Camilla inheriting those same symbols reads as something closer to a wound being reopened. Even when she's done nothing wrong. Even when every single piece she's worn was legally, institutionally, completely hers to wear. That's not a legal problem. That's a memory problem. And memory, unlike inheritance law, doesn't follow anyone's rules. So here's where this leaves us, at the end of 4 objects and 45 years of history. A ring chosen from a catalogue by a 20-year-old bride that became the one clean inheritance story in this entire family, passed from mother to son to daughter-in-law without a single public complaint. A brooch, older than the monarchy's living memory, that inspired that very ring, now worn by the one woman whose presence in this story still unsettles people, even when she's broken no rule at all. A necklace, given personally, lovingly, on a wedding morning, later reshaped into something its original owner might never recognize, its transformation explained by almost no one. And a brooch worn once in triumph, then hidden for 23 years, before resurfacing first on the woman connected to Diana's heartbreak, and finally, at last, on the woman who now holds Diana's old title. For objects. One family. One question that none of them can actually answer, because objects don't get a vote in how they're remembered. Diana died at 36, in the middle of a story she never got to finish writing herself. Everything that's happened to her jewelry since then, the sapphire brooch, the redesigned necklace, the feathers passed hand to hand, has been the rest of the family finishing that story for her. Sometimes gracefully. Sometimes clumsily. Always, whether they intended it or not, in full public view. There's a coronation in 2023 where Camilla is formally crowned queen, jewelry and all, decades of controversy quietly folded into a single ceremonial moment. There's a dress, worn in 1994, on the same night Charles admitted his affair on national television, and a strikingly similar dress Camilla wore herself, roughly a year later, that some accused of echoing it deliberately. 40 years of small, quiet decisions about fabric and stone and who gets photographed wearing what. And underneath every single one of them, the same unresolved question this entire story has been circling from the very first Sapphire in 1981. Who really owns a memory once the person who lived it is gone? I don't think there's a clean answer. I'm not sure there ever will be. But if you want to see where this argument goes next, stay close. Because the next chapter in this family's jewelry history is already being written right now, in real time, and it involves a piece nobody has publicly connected to Diana yet. A piece currently sitting, quietly, in a private collection most people don't even know exists. You're not going to want to miss what happens when it finally resurfaces.